Ward, the boy who was to become King Arthur, had been struggling with the painful chilblains on his toes for days. The cold, bitter wine had left his feet numb and swollen, and no amount of rubbing or warming could make the pain go away. Feeling desperate, he decided to seek out Merlin, the wise and powerful wizard, hoping that a touch of magic might offer relief. "Please, Merlin," Ward begged, his voice a little embarrassed but full of hope. "Could you help me with these chilblains?" Merlin, who had been bent over his books, muttered without looking up, "Be off." "I'm busy. Boy, I have important work to do." Ward frowned, but, determined to find a solution, he turned and left Merlin's cluttered cottage, his feet aching with every step. It didn't take long for him to think of another possibility. If Merlin was too busy, perhaps another magic user could help. Ward set off to visit Madame Mim, the eccentric witch who lived on the far side of the woods. Madame Mim's house smelled of strange herbs and sour potions, and she was in the middle of baking a souffle made of minced toadstool. Ward had heard rumors of her magical cooking, but he had never tasted it. He hoped the witch's magic might work a little faster than Merlin's. He knocked on the door, and then, seeing it ajar, pushed it open. Just as he did, a cold gust of wind blew through, causing Madame Mim's souffle to sink with a dramatic flop. Double quotes no. Mim shrieked, her face turning bright purple. "My souffle, it's ruined." She turned sharply to face Ward, her eyes narrowing. You're a little toad, that's what you are." Before Ward could even protest, the witch raised her hands, muttering a spell under her breath. In the blink of an eye, the ground seemed to tip beneath him, and Ward felt his body shrinking, his limbs transforming. His hands and feet morphed into slimy, webbed appendages. His face elongated, his mouth turned wide and grotesque. Ward tried to cry out, but all that escaped his mouth was a croak. And there he was, standing in the middle of the room, a toad. Madame Mim stared at him in shock. "Oh no, what have I done? My spells are usually so unreliable, and this one, well, it really backfired. I've turned you into a toad by mistake." The toad, Ward groaned inwardly. He hated being a toad. He longed to be a boy again, but he had no idea how to break the spell. Mim looked flustered and irritated, shouting, "Be Ward again," but nothing happened. All Ward could do was hop helplessly around the room, feeling utterly miserable. "Ugh," Ward grunted, trying to croak out his frustration. He couldn't stay a toad forever, not like this. What if Merlin didn't even recognize him? He couldn't imagine the consequences of being stuck in his toad form for the rest of his life. With a last desperate hop, Ward made his way out of the house and into the snowy world outside. The cold wasn't any better now that he was a toad, and he felt every inch of the snow as it pressed against his little body. Still, he had to try to find Merlin, or at least someone who could break the spell. Plop, plop, Ward flip-flopped his way through the snow, hopping awkwardly on his stubby little legs. It wasn't graceful, and it certainly wasn't fast, but he kept at it, praying that Merlin might still be able to help him. Ward finally made it back to Merlin's home, exhausted and utterly embarrassed. He hopped to the doorstep, his tiny toad eyes darting about in panic. "Merlin," he thought to himself, "what if Merlin doesn't recognize me?" Just as he thought this, the door opened. Merlin stood in the doorway, his eyes twinkling with understanding. Without a word, he raised his hands, murmured a soft incantation, and in an instant, Ward was standing before him again, back in his human form, though still feeling the lingering sting of his chilblains. Ward gasped with relief. "Thank you," he exclaimed, looking down at his feet, now free from the awful toad transformation and the numbing cold. Merlin grunted in his usual way. "I'd best magic those chilblains away before you get into more trouble, boy," he said huffily, and with a flick of his wrist, the chilblains vanished. Ward wiggled his toes in delight. "Oh, thank you, Merlin," he said gratefully. I'll never bother you again with my feet." Merlin chuckled softly but shook his head. "If you keep getting into such scrapes, I'm afraid I'll be seeing a lot of you, Ward. Now, off you go before you end up with something else to complain about." Wart nodded, his face bright with gratitude. He rushed back to Sir Ector's castle, still smiling. But from then on, whenever the cold nipped at his toes, he made sure to put up with the pain. Anything rather than be turned into a toad again. As the years went by, Wart grew into a wise young man, ready to face many trials and tribulations. But he always remembered the lesson from that day. Not every magic spell was worth the trouble, and sometimes the best thing to do was to endure and keep your feet warm the old-fashioned way. After all, a little Chilblain was nothing compared to being turned into a toad. As Wart grew older, he often found himself thinking back to the day he had been turned into a toad. It was one of the many lessons that Merlin had unknowingly taught him about magic and the importance of patience. But it wasn't just a lesson about Chilblains that stayed with him. It was the realization that not every problem could be solved with a flick of a wand. The experience with Madame Mim, though embarrassing, had also been a turning point in Wart's understanding of magic's unpredictability. The witch's magic was often erratic and uncontrollable, much like the chaotic nature of her own personality. Wart had learned that magic, when it wasn't wielded with care and wisdom, could cause more harm than good. And he had learned something about his own resilience. He had faced the ordeal of being a toad, had hopped through the cold and snow, and had survived the discomfort. He hadn't broken, and that made him stronger. Merlin, too, had played an important role in shaping Ward's character. The wise old wizard may have been a bit absent-minded at times, wrapped up in his books and thoughts, but his teachings went far beyond just spells and potions. Merlin's patience and insight helped Ward develop a deep understanding of his own potential, and though his mentor's eccentricities could be frustrating, Ward came to appreciate the wizard's wisdom in a deeper way as he grew older. One winter, several years after the Toad incident, a crisis arose in the kingdom. Sir Ector, Wart's adoptive father, had been gravely injured during a hunting expedition. It was a rare occasion that the young boy, now teenager, found himself the one tasked with making important decisions. Wart was overwhelmed by the responsibility and the weight of his father's injury, but he did his best to stay composed. He thought about the lessons he had learned, both from Merlin and from his own experiences. He couldn't solve everything with magic. He knew that now. The key, he realized, was in how he approached each situation with courage and wisdom. One night, while wandering the castle grounds, Wart found himself standing by the old oak tree, the one that Merlin had often used as a meeting spot during his lessons. The air was crisp, and the chill of winter hung in the air, reminding him of the Chilblains that had first sent him to seek magic. But this time, instead of seeking a quick fix, he simply stood there and thought about the challenges ahead. Merlin, having noticed his young pupil's solitude, appeared beside him with his usual, slightly distracted presence. "You look troubled, Wart," he said, peering at him over his spectacles. "I'm not sure what to do," Merlin, Wart admitted. "Sir Ector is badly hurt, and I'm not sure how to help him." "It's not a problem I can solve with magic." Merlin's eyes softened. "Ah, I see you've learned, then, that magic is not the answer to everything. Sometimes, the strength lies in what you can do with your own hands, your own heart. It's the patience to wait and listen to what needs to be done, and the courage to act when the time is right." Wart nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. He realized that, just as he had faced the challenge of being a toad with resilience, he could now face this challenge of leadership with the same steadiness. The next few days were difficult as Wart balanced the care of Sir Ector with the needs of the kingdom. He sought advice from trusted advisors, worked tirelessly to keep the kingdom running smoothly, and visited his father's bedside every day. There were no magical solutions, no quick fixes. But Wart did what he could, using his growing wisdom to lead with grace and determination. As the days passed, Sir Ector slowly began to recover, and Wart found a new sense of confidence in himself. He realized that being a leader wasn't about magical power or solving problems with a spell. It was about making the right decisions in the face of adversity and using the strength of character he had built over the years. And so, with each passing year, Wart grew not just in age, but in wisdom. He became a young man who understood that while magic might offer temporary solutions, it was the challenges, the patience, and the hard work that truly shaped a king. As his father's health returned and the kingdom settled, Wart felt the weight of his future responsibilities begin to settle onto his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a gift. He would one day rule the kingdom with the lessons of his youth to guide him, knowing that the greatest magic was not in spells, but in the power of perseverance, compassion, and wisdom. And whenever the cold winds of winter blew in, bringing with them a reminder of the Chilblains that had once caused him such misery, Wart smiled quietly to himself. He was no longer the boy with frozen toes, hoping for a quick fix. He was ready to face the world no matter how cold it got with all the patience and strength he had gained.